Chapter 1: Why We Overthink. The clear mind, breaking free from overthinking. Take a slow breath. Let it fill your lungs completely, then release it gently. As you settle into this moment, know that what you're about to explore is not just information, but a pathway toward a quieter, clearer mind. A mind that thinks when it needs to, and rests when it doesn't. A mind that serves you, rather than exhausts you. We begin this journey together by understanding something that may have brought you here: the weight of overthinking. That endless loop of thoughts that spin through your consciousness like a carousel that never stops. The questions that multiply instead of resolve. The scenarios that replay and reshape themselves until you can no longer distinguish what actually happened from what you've imagined. You are not alone in this experience. And more importantly, you are not broken. Before watching the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. New audiobook videos are posted on this channel every day. What you're experiencing is a natural response of a remarkably sophisticated system, your brain, doing what it believes is protecting you. Our journey is about teaching that system a new way forward. The architecture of overthinking. Let me take you inside your brain for a moment. Not in a cold, clinical way, but as if we're exploring a vast cathedral of thought, built over millions of years of evolution. At the center of this cathedral sits a small, almond-shaped structure called the amygdala. Think of it as an ancient alarm system, installed in our ancestors when the rustling of grass could mean the difference between life and death. This alarm system served us extraordinarily well when survival meant outrunning predators or finding shelter before nightfall. The amygdala learned to scan constantly for danger, to process threats faster than conscious thought, to keep us vigilant and alive. It became so good at its job that it earned a permanent position in our neural architecture, passed down through countless generations. But here's where our story takes an interesting turn. That same alarm system now fires not at saber-toothed tigers, but at an unanswered email. Not at approaching storms, but at an upcoming presentation. Not at physical threats, but at social uncertainties, financial worries, relationship tensions, and the infinite what-ifs of modern existence. Your brain hasn't evolved as quickly as your world has changed. The amygdala doesn't distinguish between a genuine threat and an imagined one, between a real danger and a possibility you've conjured in your mind at 3 a.m. To your ancient alarm system, worry is danger. Uncertainty is threat. And so it does what it knows best: it activates your entire threat response system. This is where overthinking begins. Not as a character flaw or a choice you're making, but as an automated response. Your prefrontal cortex, the thinking, reasoning, planning part of your brain, receives the alarm signal. It interprets this as something requires urgent attention. And so it begins to analyze, to predict, to prepare, to problem solve. It starts running scenarios like a supercomputer calculating countless possible futures. What did they mean by that comment? Run analysis. What if the project fails? Calculate probabilities. Should I have said something different? Review recording. What will happen next week, next month, next year? Generate predictions. The prefrontal cortex, trying to be helpful, trying to protect you, becomes a thought-generating machine that cannot find its off switch. Neuroscientists have discovered something fascinating through brain imaging studies. When someone is overthinking, their brain shows heightened activity in both the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, along with increased connectivity between these regions. It's as if two parts of an orchestra are playing louder and faster while the conductor has left the stage. The music becomes noise. The symphony becomes chaos. There's a network in your brain called the default mode network, which activates when you're not focused on the outside world. It's the network of internal thought, of reflection, and planning. In balanced amounts, this network helps you learn from the past and prepare for the future. But in overthinking, this network becomes hyperactive, endlessly churning through memories and possibilities, unable to settle into the present moment. Research published in biological psychiatry journals has shown that chronic overthinkers have stronger connections within this default mode network and weaker connections to networks responsible for present moment awareness. Their brains have literally rewired themselves to favor rumination over presence. But here's the hopeful truth: neuroplasticity means this wiring can change. Your brain remains capable of learning new patterns throughout your entire life. The illusion of control. Now let's explore something deeper, something that often lies beneath the surface of overthinking: the desperate need for control in an uncontrollable world. Imagine you're holding a handful of sand. The tighter you squeeze, trying to hold every grain, the more it slips through your fingers. Overthinking operates on this same paradox. When we overthink, we believe we're gaining control. We tell ourselves that if we just think about it enough, analyze it thoroughly enough, consider every angle sufficiently, then we'll find certainty. We'll know what to do. We'll be prepared for any outcome. We'll finally feel safe. This belief is seductive because it contains a kernel of truth. Thinking does help us solve problems. Planning does improve outcomes. Analysis does reveal insights. But overthinking is what happens when thinking crosses from tool into trap, when the search for certainty becomes more painful than the uncertainty itself. Psychological research on tolerance of uncertainty has revealed something crucial. People who struggle most with overthinking often have what researchers call low uncertainty tolerance. For them, not knowing feels dangerous. The gap between what is and what could be becomes a chasm that must be filled, immediately, with thoughts, plans, and predictions. But here's what happens in that urgent filling. A colleague gives you ambiguous feedback on your work. Your mind immediately generates explanations: they're disappointed in me, I'm going to lose my job, I'm not good enough, I should have done it differently, what will I tell my family, how will I pay my bills, what does this mean for my future? Each thought spawns 3 more. Each answer generates new questions. Notice what's happening here. The original uncertainty, that ambiguous feedback, was small and specific. But overthinking transformed it into an avalanche of uncertainties, each one bigger and more catastrophic than the last. You began seeking control and ended up with chaos. The truth that overthinking tries to hide from you is this: you cannot think your way to complete certainty about the future. You cannot analyze your way to guaranteed outcomes. You cannot predict every consequence or prepare for every possibility. The universe remains magnificently, terrifyingly, beautifully uncertain, regardless of how much mental energy you pour into trying to control it. A study tracking people over time found something remarkable. Those who practiced accepting uncertainty, who learned to become comfortable with not knowing, reported significantly less anxiety and made decisions more quickly without worse outcomes. They weren't less intelligent or less prepared. They were simply less exhausted, because they weren't spending their precious mental resources trying to achieve the impossible. The weight of yesterday. There's another powerful force feeding your overthinking: the past. Every experience you've ever had lives somewhere in your neural networks, creating patterns of expectation and response. Your brain is constantly asking, have I been here before? What happened last time? What should I do based on what I learned? This learning from experience is vital for survival and growth. Touch a hot stove once, and you learn to be careful around heat. Experience betrayal in a relationship, and you learn to notice red flags. Make a mistake at work, and you learn to double-check your calculations. The past teaches us, and this teaching keeps us safe. But sometimes the past doesn't teach us, it haunts us. The mistake you made 3 years ago plays in your mind as vividly as if it happened this morning. The embarrassing moment from your adolescence surfaces whenever you're about to speak in public. The relationship that ended badly colors every new connection with suspicion. The opportunities you missed become evidence of a pattern you fear will repeat forever. This is your brain trying to protect you by learning from pain. But overthinking takes this protective mechanism and turns it into a prison. You begin to believe that because something happened before, it will happen again. Because you felt inadequate once, you'll always be inadequate. Because you made a mistake, you're fundamentally flawed. The past stops being a teacher and becomes a prophet, declaring your future with absolute certainty. Neuroscience reveals that memories aren't fixed recordings stored in some mental archive. Every time you recall a memory, you're actually reconstructing it, and in that reconstruction, you can change it. The emotions attached to memories can intensify or fade. The details can shift. the meaning can transform. But when you overthink, you tend to replay the most painful versions repeatedly, strengthening neural pathways associated with shame, regret, and fear. A client once described this to me as living in a museum of my worst moments. Every day, she would mentally walk through the galleries, studying each failure in excruciating detail. The time she said the wrong thing at a party. The project that didn't succeed. The relationship that fell apart. She believed that by analyzing these moments enough, she could somehow prevent future pain. Instead, she was training her brain to expect pain, to look for it, to create it even when it wasn't there. The exhaustion of constant vigilance. Let's talk about what all this overthinking costs you. Not in abstract terms, but in the concrete currency of your daily life, your energy, your joy, your ability to be present for the moments that matter. Your brain comprises only about 2% of your body weight, but it consumes roughly 20% of your energy. Thinking is metabolically expensive. Now imagine running a complex calculation program on your computer continuously, day and night, without rest. The processor heats up. The battery drains. The system slows down. Your mind works the same way. Chronic overthinking creates a state of perpetual mental fatigue. You wake up tired, not because your body didn't rest, but because your mind never stopped working. You find it difficult to concentrate on simple tasks because your attention is already allocated to dozens of internal dialogues. You feel overwhelmed by decisions that used to feel straightforward, because your decision-making faculties are already exhausted from analyzing everything else. This exhaustion affects more than just your thoughts. Research in psychoneuroimmunology has shown that chronic mental stress, including persistent overthinking, impacts your immune system, your cardiovascular health, your digestion, your sleep quality, and even your cellular aging. The body and mind are not separate systems, they're different instruments in the same orchestra. When the mind plays discord, the body feels it. But perhaps the deepest cost is what overthinking steals from your present moment. Right now, as you listen to these words, life is happening. The air moves in and out of your lungs. Light and shadow play across surfaces. Sounds emerge and fade. Sensations arise in your body. This is the only moment you ever truly have, and yet overthinking pulls you away from it constantly, dragging you into past regrets or future worries. Think about the last time you had a conversation with someone you love while your mind was spinning through other concerns. You were physically present, but mentally absent. They were talking, sharing something important, and you were nodding while actually reviewing yesterday's meeting or rehearsing tomorrow's presentation. You missed the moment. You missed the connection. You missed the life that was happening right in front of you. A research study asked people to rate their happiness at random moments throughout their day and to note whether they were focused on what they were doing or thinking about something else. The findings were striking. People were significantly less happy when their minds were wandering, regardless of what they were actually doing. Even pleasant activities brought less joy when accompanied by an absent, overthinking mind. A different possibility. Now, take another slow breath. We've explored the landscape of overthinking together, understanding its origins, its mechanisms, its costs. This understanding isn't meant to burden you further but to illuminate a path forward. Because here's what I want you to know: you are not your thoughts. You are not your overthinking. You are the awareness that notices the thoughts, the consciousness that observes the thinking. Imagine standing beside a river. The water flows past you constantly, carrying leaves, branches, sometimes debris. You can watch the river, acknowledge what flows by, without diving in and being swept away by the current. Your thoughts are like that river. They flow through your consciousness constantly, but you don't have to be carried away by each one. You can learn to stand on the bank, watching with calm awareness. This isn't about positive thinking or forcing yourself to stop having certain thoughts. Those approaches often backfire, creating more resistance and more overthinking. Instead, this is about developing a new relationship with your thinking mind. About learning when to engage with thoughts and when to let them pass. About training your attention like you would train a puppy, gently, patiently, bringing it back to the present moment again and again. The techniques we'll explore together in the coming chapters aren't quick fixes or magic solutions. They're practices, which means they require practice. They're skills, which means they strengthen with use. They represent a different way of being with your mind, a way that honors both its incredible capabilities and its need for rest. You have within you right now everything you need to break free from the cycle of overthinking. You have the capacity to notice when your mind is spinning. You have the ability to redirect your attention. You have the wisdom to distinguish between productive thinking and mental noise. These capacities may feel weak right now, like muscles that haven't been used in a long time, but they're there, waiting to be strengthened. Practice the settling breath. Let's begin with something simple but profound. I'm going to guide you through a brief practice that you can return to anytime overthinking begins. This is called the settling breath, and it works by interrupting the stress response cycle and returning your nervous system to baseline. Find a comfortable position, wherever you are. You can close your eyes, or simply soften your gaze downward. Place one hand on your chest and one hand on your belly. Begin by noticing your natural breath, without trying to change it. Just observe. Is it shallow or deep? Fast or slow? Smooth or uneven? Simply notice, without judgment. Now, we're going to extend the exhale. Breathe in naturally through your nose for a count of 4. Then exhale slowly through your mouth for a count of 6 or 8, whichever feels comfortable. The key is making the exhale longer than the inhale. This signals your parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system, to activate. It tells your body, we are safe. We can calm down. As you breathe this way, you might notice thoughts arising. This is completely normal. When you notice a thought, imagine it as a cloud passing through the sky of your awareness. You see it, acknowledge it, and let it drift on. Return your attention gently to the counting, to the sensation of breath moving through your body. Continue for 5 breaths like this. 4 counts in, 6 to 8 counts out. With each exhale, imagine releasing not just air, but tension, worry, the need to figure everything out right now. With each inhale, imagine drawing in calm, clarity, the simple peace of this present moment. When you're ready, return to your natural breathing. Notice how you feel. Perhaps slightly calmer, perhaps more present, perhaps just different. There's no right way to feel. You've simply given your nervous system a moment to settle, and given your mind a taste of what it's like to rest from overthinking. This practice is always available to you. In a difficult meeting, before making a decision, when lying awake at night, anytime the carousel of thoughts begins to spin too fast. 3 to 5 settling breaths can create a small space of calm in the storm, a brief respite that reminds you, you are more than your thoughts, and you have the power to return to stillness. Moving forward. We begun to understand overthinking not as an enemy to defeat, but as a pattern to recognize and redirect. In the chapters ahead, we'll build on this foundation, exploring specific techniques for different aspects of overthinking. How to calm the anxious predictions about the future. How to release the grip of past regrets. How to make decisions without endless analysis. How to create a mind that thinks clearly when needed and rests deeply when it doesn't. But for now, simply rest in what you've learned. Your overthinking makes sense. It has reasons, mechanisms, origins. You're not doing it because you're weak or flawed. You're doing it because you're human, equipped with an ancient alarm system trying to navigate a modern world. The path forward isn't about fighting your mind, but about training it gently, consistently, with compassion for yourself and trust in your capacity to change. Take one more settling breath. Feel yourself here, now, in this moment. This moment is enough. You are enough. And the clear, calm mind you seek is not somewhere distant, but right here, waiting beneath the noise, ready to emerge as you learn to let the overthinking settle like stirred water returning to stillness. The journey continues. Walk it with patience. Walk it with gentleness. Walk it with the knowing that each small step away from overthinking is a step toward the peace you deserve. Chapter 2, Breaking the Loop. If you've returned to continue this journey, it means something within you recognizes the possibility of change. Perhaps you've already tried this settling breath practice. Perhaps you've simply noticed you're overthinking with slightly more awareness. Whatever brought you back to this moment, know that you're exactly where you need to be. In our first conversation, we explored the why of overthinking. We understood its evolutionary roots, its neural mechanisms, its seductive promise of control. Now we move into the how, the practical terrain of interruption and redirection. Because understanding overthinking is valuable, but learning to interrupt it in real time is transformative. Think of overthinking as a train that's left the station and is picking up speed. The longer it runs, the harder it becomes to stop. But what if you could catch it earlier, when it's just beginning to pull away? What if you could recognize the moment the engine starts, step onto the platform, and choose a different train entirely? This is the skill we're cultivating together, the ability to catch overthinking at its inception and gently guide your mind toward stillness. The moment of recognition. There's a precise instant when thinking becomes overthinking, when productive reflection transforms into rumination. Learning to recognize this moment is like developing a sixth sense, an internal alarm that whispers, "You've crossed the line. Pay attention now." For most people, this moment arrives unmarked and unnoticed. You're working on a task, and suddenly realize you've been staring at the screen for 10 minutes, lost in a mental spiral about something completely unrelated. You're having a conversation, and your partner asks if you're listening, pulling you from a cascade of anxious predictions. You're trying to fall asleep, and 2 hours have passed while you've mentally replayed every detail of your day, searching for mistakes. These are late recognitions, moments when overthinking has already taken you far from shore. But with practice, you can learn to catch it earlier, at the shoreline, before you're swept into deep water. The first signal often comes from your body, not your mind. This is crucial to understand. Your body registers the shift from thinking to overthinking before your conscious awareness does. The tightness that begins in your chest or throat. The tension that creeps into your shoulders. The slight acceleration of your heartbeat. The shallow quality your breathing takes on. The unsettled feeling in your stomach, as if you've swallowed something that won't digest. Research in somatic psychology has demonstrated that the body holds emotional information that the conscious mind hasn't yet processed. When you begin to overthink, your nervous system activates the stress response. Cortisol and adrenaline start flowing before you've even consciously registered that you're worried. Your body knows you're overthinking before you do. So the first practice in breaking the loop is this: become an anthropologist of your own physical experience. Start noticing the bodily signatures of your overthinking. Does your jaw clench? Do your hands become fists? Does your breathing move up into your chest, becoming rapid and shallow? Does a particular part of your body tense or ache? These physical markers are your early warning system, your opportunity for early intervention. Let me guide you through a simple body scan right now. Wherever you are, bring your attention to your body. Start at the crown of your head and slowly move downward. Notice your forehead. Is it smooth or furrowed? Your eyes. Are they soft or tense? Your jaw. Clenched or relaxed? Your neck and shoulders. Tight or loose? Your chest. Open or constricted? Your belly. Soft or hard? Your hands. Loose or gripping? Your legs and feet. Heavy or restless? Just notice. Don't try to change anything yet. Simply become aware. This awareness itself is powerful because it interrupts the automaticity of overthinking. The moment you bring conscious attention to your body, you've stepped outside the thought spiral, even if just for a second. And that second is enough to begin change. The body is anchor. Your body exists only in the present moment. It cannot be in yesterday or tomorrow. Your mind can time travel endlessly, replaying the past, rehearsing the future, but your body is always here, always now. This makes your body the most reliable anchor back to the present moment, the surest way to interrupt the loop of overthinking. Ancient contemplative traditions understood this deeply. they developed practices that use the body as a doorway to presence. Modern neuroscience has confirmed their wisdom. Studies using functional MRI scans show that when people focus on physical sensations, activity in the default mode network, that overthinking network we discussed earlier, decreases significantly. Awareness of the body literally quiets the overthinking mind. Let me teach you a technique called the 5 senses grounding practice. You can do this anywhere, anytime you notice overthinking beginning. It works by engaging each of your 5 senses, pulling your attention out of your thoughts and into your immediate sensory experience. First, look around and identify 5 things you can see. Really look at them. Notice their colors, shapes, textures. The way light falls across a surface. The shadow in a corner. The pattern on a wall. Say them silently to yourself. I see the blue cup, I see the wooden table, I see the plant with its green leaves, I see the window with raindrops, I see my hands resting in my lap. Next, notice 4 things you can physically feel. The weight of your body against the chair. The fabric of your clothes against your skin. The air moving in and out of your nostrils. The floor beneath your feet. Again, name them. I feel the chair supporting me, I feel my shirt touching my shoulders, I feel my breath in my nose, I feel the floor solid beneath me. Then, identify 3 things you can hear. Maybe traffic in the distance. The hum of electronics. Birds outside. Your own breathing. The silence itself, if that's what's present. I hear the distant car, I hear the refrigerator humming, I hear my breath. Now, notice 2 things you can smell. This might be subtle. The faint scent of coffee. The smell of soap on your hands. The air itself has a quality. If you can't smell anything distinct, that's fine too. Simply notice the experience of breathing in. I smell the coffee, I smell the clean air. Finally, 1 thing you can taste. The lingering flavor of your last meal or drink. The taste of your own mouth. The freshness of the air. I taste the mint tea, or I taste nothing in particular, and that's my experience right now. When you complete this practice, pause and notice. Where is your overthinking now? Most people find it has significantly diminished or disappeared entirely. You've interrupted the loop not through force or resistance, but through redirection. You've shown your mind that the present moment, accessed through the senses, is available as an alternative to the thought spiral. The beauty of this practice is its portability. You can use an abbreviated version in any situation. Waiting in line at the grocery store and feeling anxiety rising, notice 3 things you can see, 2 you can hear, 1 you can feel. Sitting in a meeting and feeling your mind starting to spin, bring attention to the sensation of your feet on the floor, the chair beneath you, the sounds in the room. The practice scales to fit the moment. Grounding through touch and movement. Sometimes the thought spiral is too strong for a purely observational practice. When overthinking has real momentum, you need something more dynamic, more physical, to interrupt it. This is where touch and movement become powerful tools. There's a technique from dialectical behavior therapy called the ice cube method. When you're in acute overwhelm, caught in a severe loop of overthinking, hold an ice cube in your hand or place it on the inside of your wrist. The intense cold sensation immediately activates your sensory nervous system, pulling attention away from thoughts and into physical sensation. It's difficult to overthink about tomorrow's presentation when your hand is registering sharp cold right now. The sensation is strong enough to interrupt even intense mental spirals. If ice isn't available, you can use other strong physical sensations. Splash very cold water on your face. Bite into a lemon. Do 10 jumping jacks or run up a flight of stairs until your heart rate elevates and your breathing changes. Clap your hands together sharply several times. These intense sensory experiences act as pattern interrupts, breaking the neural loop of overthinking through sheer physical intensity. But not every moment calls for intensity. Sometimes gentler physical grounding is more appropriate. Try this now. Press your feet firmly into the floor. Really press, feeling the connection between your body and the earth beneath you. Press your hands together, palm to palm, and hold that pressure for 10 seconds. Or try progressive muscle relaxation, tense a muscle group for 5 seconds, then release. Move through your body, feet, legs, abdomen, hands, arms, shoulders, face. The act of deliberately tensing and releasing breaks the unconscious tension pattern that accompanies overthinking. Walking meditation offers another avenue for physical interruption of mental loops. Not walking to get somewhere, but walking as a practice of presence. As you walk, even if just around your room, notice each component of the movement. The lifting of your foot. The moving through space. The placing down. The shift of weight. The next foot lifting. Walking becomes not transport but a choreography of attention, each step an anchor to now. A client once told me she keeps a small stone in her pocket specifically for overthinking moments. When she notices her mind spiraling, she reaches into her pocket and holds the stone. She feels its weight, its temperature, its texture. She runs her thumb over its smooth surface. This simple tactile ritual has become her personal pattern interrupt, a physical gesture that signals to her nervous system, we're coming back to the body, back to now, back to solid ground. The stop and redirect principle. Now we come to a deceptively simple but profoundly effective technique, the mental stop signal combined with conscious redirection. This practice acknowledges something important: you cannot stop thinking, but you can stop following a particular train of thought and consciously choose a different direction. Imagine your thoughts as paths in a forest. Overthinking is what happens when you keep walking the same narrow, overgrown path, deeper and deeper into darkness. The stop and redirect principle is about catching yourself on that path, stopping, and deliberately choosing a different trail, one that leads toward light. Here's how it works in practice. When you recognize you're overthinking, either through bodily signals or simply noticing your mental activity, you say firmly, either aloud or silently, stop. Some people prefer pause or enough or I see you. The specific word matters less than the intention behind it, a clear, decisive interruption of the thought pattern. This is not suppression or denial. You're not pretending the thoughts don't exist or trying to forcibly eliminate them. You're simply declining to continue following them. Think of it as standing at a fork in a path and choosing consciously which way to go rather than sleepwalking down a familiar trail. After the stop signal comes the critical redirect phase. You must give your mind something to do, somewhere else to go. An empty mind will quickly fill again with the same thoughts. This is where you engage a prepared redirect activity. Some possibilities: return to your breath, counting 5 slow inhales and exhales. Recite something memorized, like a poem or a meaningful quote. Engage in a mental task that requires just enough focus to occupy your working memory, like counting backwards from 100 by 7s. Notice your environment using the 5 senses practice we explored earlier. One particularly effective redirect is what I call the gratitude interrupt. When you notice overthinking, stop and immediately identify 3 specific things you're grateful for in this moment. Not generic gratitudes, but specific, present moment appreciations. I'm grateful for the warmth of this coffee in my hands. I'm grateful that my body is healthy enough to walk. I'm grateful for the sunlight coming through this window. This redirect works neurologically because gratitude and anxiety cannot fully coexist. They activate different neural pathways. Gratitude pulls you toward appreciation of what is, while overthinking pulls you toward fear of what might be. The key to the stop and redirect principle is preparation. Don't wait until you're in the middle of a thought spiral to figure out your redirect strategy. Decide now, while your mind is relatively clear, what your personal redirect activities will be. Write them down if that helps. Practice them when you're calm so they become readily accessible when you're not. Think of them as emergency supplies you're packing before the storm arrives. Recognizing your triggers. Breaking the loop of overthinking becomes significantly easier when you understand what initiates it. Everyone has specific triggers, situations or stimuli that reliably activate their overthinking patterns. Identifying your personal triggers is like studying a map before a journey. You learn where the difficult terrain lies so you can prepare for it or choose alternative routes. Triggers generally fall into several categories. There are situational triggers. specific circumstances that reliably initiate overthinking. Social events for someone with social anxiety. Performance situations for someone who fears judgment. Decision points for someone who struggles with uncertainty. Conflict or disagreement for someone who fears abandonment or rejection. There are temporal triggers, specific times when overthinking tends to emerge. Late at night is common, when fatigue lowers your mental defenses and darkness seems to amplify worries. Sunday evenings as the work week approaches. Anniversary dates of painful events. Transition periods between activities when the mind isn't occupied. There are relational triggers, specific people or relationship dynamics that activate overthinking. The colleague whose opinion you overvalue. The parent whose approval you still seek. The friend who makes ambiguous comments. The partner whose mood affects your emotional state. There are internal state triggers. Particular physical or emotional conditions that lower your resilience to overthinking. Hunger, fatigue, physical illness, hormonal shifts, stress accumulation. When your basic needs aren't met, your nervous system becomes more reactive and your mind more prone to spiraling. Take a moment to reflect on your own experience. When does your overthinking most commonly occur? What situations precede it? Are there patterns you can identify? This reflection isn't about self-criticism or judgment. It's about developing strategic awareness. The samurai studies the battlefield before the fight. You're studying the landscape of your mind. Once you've identified your triggers, you can develop specific preparation strategies. If social events trigger your overthinking, you might practice grounding techniques before attending and commit to using them when you notice activation. If nighttime is your vulnerable time, you might establish a calming evening ritual that includes the settling breath practice before bed. If conflict with a specific person triggers spirals, you might prepare redirect statements in advance or plan to take a physical break when you feel activation beginning. One powerful approach is the preemptive strike. If you know a triggering situation is approaching, you can deliberately engage grounding and calming practices beforehand, creating a buffer of resilience. An athlete stretches before competing. A singer warms up before performing. You can prepare your nervous system before entering trigger territory. A client who struggled with overthinking before important meetings developed this routine. 15 minutes before the meeting, she would step outside, do 5 settling breaths, practice the 5 senses grounding, and mentally rehearse using the stop and redirect technique if needed during the meeting. This preparation didn't eliminate her anxiety, but it significantly reduced the intensity of her overthinking and gave her concrete tools to use in the moment. Practice the awareness inventory. Let's integrate what we've explored with a practice you can return to regularly. This is your awareness inventory, a brief systematic check-in that helps you catch overthinking early and respond effectively. Find a quiet moment. Close your eyes or soften your gaze. Take 3 settling breaths, extending the exhale. Then ask yourself these questions, pausing to genuinely sense the answer before moving to the next. What am I thinking about right now? Simply notice the content of your thoughts without judgment. Are they focused on the present, the past, or the future? Are they productive or spinning? Just observe. What am I feeling in my body? Scan from head to toe. Notice any tension, tightness, restlessness, or ease. Where do you feel sensation most strongly? What emotions are present? Name them simply. Anxious. Calm. Frustrated. Content. Confused. Multiple emotions can coexist. Don't try to change them, just identify them. Is this thinking serving me? This is the key discernment question. Is this mental activity moving you toward clarity and action, or is it consuming energy without producing insight? Be honest with yourself. If you discover overthinking is present, implement your chosen interrupt technique. Perhaps the 5 senses grounding. Perhaps the stop and redirect. Perhaps the settling breath. Choose one and engage it fully. Then, after your chosen technique, return to the awareness inventory and notice what is shifted. Are the thoughts different? Is the body more relaxed? Have the emotions changed? This closing check helps you recognize the effectiveness of your intervention and builds trust in your capacity to shift your state. This awareness inventory can be done in 2 minutes. Done regularly, perhaps morning, midday, and evening, it creates checkpoints throughout your day, opportunities to catch overthinking early and course correct before it gains momentum. Think of it as regular system maintenance for your mind, brief pauses to ensure you're running efficiently rather than overheating. There's no right choice, only what works for your nervous system, your personality, your life. Match each technique to different intensity levels of overthinking. For mild spiraling, when you're just beginning to loop, which gentle technique works best? For moderate overthinking, when you're deeper in but still accessible, which mid-range technique helps? For intense spiraling, when you're fully caught and need something powerful, which strong intervention breaks through? This creates a graduated response system. You don't use a fire hose when a cup of water will do. You match the intervention to the intensity, conserving energy and building confidence in your ability to calibrate your response. Now, consider your specific triggers we discussed earlier. For each major trigger you identified, assign a pre-prepared strategy. If nighttime is triggering, your strategy might be: complete the awareness inventory before bed, keep a journal by the bedside for thought downloads, and commit to the settling breath if awakening with anxiety. If social situations trigger you, your strategy might be: arrive early to acclimate, identify an exit plan for breaks, practice 5 senses grounding every 30 minutes. This preparation transforms you from reactive to proactive. Instead of being ambushed by overthinking, you're meeting it with prepared responses. A martial artist doesn't invent techniques during combat. They practice them thousands of times so they emerge naturally when needed. You're doing the same with your mind. Finally, establish accountability and tracking. Not in a judgmental way, but in a way that helps you see progress and refine your approach. Perhaps each evening, you briefly note: did I notice overthinking today? Did I use a technique? What was the result? Over time, patterns emerge. You discover which techniques work best in which situations. You see your noticing happening earlier. You witness the loops getting shorter. This is your toolkit. Personal, practical, prepared. It's not about perfection. It's about having resources readily available when your mind begins to spiral. It's about building trust in your capacity to interrupt the loop and return to clarity. The ripple effect of interruption. Something remarkable happens when you consistently practice interrupting overthinking. The effects ripple outward far beyond the moments of practice themselves. Your entire relationship with your mind begins to shift. First, you develop what psychologists call metacognitive awareness, the ability to think about your thinking. You stop being so identified with every thought that passes through your mind. You begin to see thoughts as mental events, transient occurrences in consciousness, rather than absolute truths or commands you must follow. This shift is profound. When a thought says everyone thinks I'm incompetent, you no longer automatically accept it as fact. Instead, you recognize, that's a thought my mind is generating, likely triggered by anxiety. It may or may not reflect reality. I can notice it without necessarily believing it or acting on it. This creates space, and in that space, choice emerges. Second, your nervous system begins to recalibrate. Each time you successfully interrupt overthinking and return to calm, you're teaching your body that the alarm signal was false. You're demonstrating that you can be safe even without constant mental vigilance. Over time, your baseline anxiety level decreases. Your nervous system learns to trust that you'll respond to real threats when they arise, and that it doesn't need to manufacture threats to keep you prepared. Third, your decision-making improves dramatically. Overthinking is essentially decision paralysis, endlessly weighing options without committing. When you can interrupt this pattern, decisions that once took hours or days begin taking minutes. Not because you're being reckless, but because you're no longer confusing more thinking with better thinking. You learn to gather sufficient information, check in with your values and intuition, and act. Then you trust yourself to handle whatever comes next. Fourth, your relationships deepen. When you're not lost in mental spirals during conversations, you're actually present with people. You hear what they're saying rather than preparing your response or worrying about how you're being perceived. You connect authentically because your attention is available for connection. People feel seen by you because you're actually seeing them, not looking through them at your own anxious thoughts. Fifth, and perhaps most importantly, you begin to reclaim your time and energy. The hours once lost to overthinking become available for activities that genuinely nourish you. The mental energy once consumed by thought spirals becomes available for creativity, learning, pleasure, rest. You discover you have far more capacity than you realized. You weren't lazy or unmotivated. You were exhausted from running a thought-generating machine that never shut down. These ripple effects build on each other, creating an upward spiral to counter the downward spiral of overthinking. Each successful interruption makes the next one slightly easier. Each return to presence strengthens the neural pathways of presence. Each moment of clarity proves that clarity is possible. Integration and commitment. We've covered substantial ground in this chapter. You've learned to recognize the early signals of overthinking through body awareness. You've practiced multiple techniques for interrupting the loop, grounding through the five senses, using physical sensations and movement, implementing the stop and redirect principle. You've identified your personal triggers and developed strategies for managing them. You've created your own interrupt toolkit. But knowledge without application remains theoretical. The real transformation happens in the thousands of small moments ahead when you choose to practice what you've learned. When you're lying awake at night and instead of continuing to spin, you do the settling breath. When you're in a meeting and instead of spiraling about how you're being perceived, you ground through your senses. When you notice the early signal of tension in your shoulders and instead of ignoring it, you pause and check in. This is not about achieving perfection. You will still overthink. There will be days when you forget every technique you've learned. There will be times when you catch yourself an hour into a spiral rather than at its beginning. This is completely normal and expected. Progress is not linear. Healing is not a straight line. What matters is the general trajectory. Are you noticing sooner, even if just a little? Are you interrupting more often, even if not every time? Are the spirals slightly shorter, slightly less intense? Are you being gentler with yourself in the process? These are the markers of genuine change. Make a commitment to yourself now. Not a rigid, punitive commitment that becomes another source of pressure, but a kind, firm commitment rooted in self-care. Something like, I commit to practicing one interrupt technique daily, even when I'm not overthinking, so it becomes second nature. Or, I commit to doing the awareness inventory each evening to track my patterns. Or, I commit to treating myself with compassion when I notice I've been overthinking, rather than piling judgment on top of the spinning. Speak your commitment aloud if you can, or write it somewhere you'll see it. Make it specific enough to be actionable, but gentle enough to be sustainable. This is not about adding more pressure to your life. It's about prioritizing the peace and clarity you deserve. The practice of return. Let me leave you with one final practice for this chapter, something you can do right now and anytime you find yourself caught in overthinking. I call it the practice of return because it's built on one simple, powerful truth: you can always return to now. No matter how far your mind has wandered, no matter how long you've been spinning, the present moment is always here, always available, always waiting for you. Sit comfortably wherever you are. Take a moment to notice that you're overthinking, if you are, or simply imagine that you are. Feel what that's like. The whirring of thoughts. The tension in your body. The exhaustion of the mental spinning. Now, very gently, bring your attention to your breath. Not to change it, just to notice it. The air flowing in. The air flowing out. The slight pause between. The rhythm that continues regardless of what you're thinking, the rhythm that's been with you since birth and will be with you until your last moment. As you notice your breath, you might notice that thoughts continue. This is natural. You're not trying to stop thoughts. You're simply choosing to put your attention on breath rather than on thoughts. Thoughts can be happening in the background, like traffic passing on a distant highway. You hear it, but you're not on the highway. You're here, with your breath, in this body, in this moment. Each time you notice you've been pulled back into thinking, and you will be, see this as an opportunity, not a failure. The moment of noticing is the moment of power. In that moment, simply say silently, returning. And gently bring your attention back to breath. Returning. Back to breath. Returning. Back to now. The mind will wander 10 times. You'll return 10 times. The mind will wander 100 times. You'll return 100 times. This is not a sign that you're doing it wrong. This is the practice. The wandering and the returning. The getting lost and the finding your way back. Each return strengthens your capacity to return. Continue this for 5 minutes, or longer if you wish. Just breath and returning. Breath and returning. Building the pathway back to now, making it wider, smoother, easier to find each time you need it. When you're ready to end the practice, don't rush back into activity. Take a moment to notice how you feel. Perhaps calmer. Perhaps clearer. Perhaps simply different. Whatever you notice is perfect. You've practiced the most important skill, the skill of return. This practice is always here for you. In the middle of the night. In a difficult conversation. Before an important decision. Anytime, anywhere, you can return. To breath. To body. To this moment. The overthinking mind wants you to believe you're trapped in the spiral. The practice of return proves, again and again, that you're free to come back to now. Take one more deep breath. Feel yourself here, grounded, present, alive. You've learned powerful tools in this chapter. You've built an interrupt toolkit. You've practiced returning. These are not just concepts now, but lived experiences in your body, neural pathways forming in your brain. The loop of overthinking can be broken. You're learning to break it. One breath, one return, one compassionate interruption at a time. The clear mind you seek is not some distant destination. It's here, now, in this moment of presence, this moment of return. And it will be here in the next moment you choose to come back to it, and the next, and the next. Rest in this knowing. Trust in your capacity. Continue the journey with gentleness and determination. The mind that thinks clearly and rests deeply is already within you, already emerging as you practice these returns to presence. You're doing beautifully. Keep going. Chapter 3: Building Mental Clarity. Imagine standing in a room filled with thousands of voices, each one demanding your attention, each one insisting that its message is urgent and essential. Some voices are shouting warnings about future disasters that may never come. Others are replaying conversations from years ago, analyzing what you should have said differently. Still others are listing tasks, generating ideas, making comparisons, passing judgments. This is the experience of the cluttered mind, and it is exhausting. But here is what you must understand: you do not need to silence all these voices. You need to change your relationship with them. You need to build mental clarity, not as a destination you reach, but as a skill you develop through consistent practice. Mental clarity is not the absence of thoughts. It is the presence of space around thoughts. It is the ability to distinguish between signal and noise, between what truly matters and what merely clamors for attention. It is the capacity to hold your attention steadily on one thing without being constantly pulled away by the siren call of distraction. In this chapter, we will explore practical methods for building this clarity, techniques that work with the mind's natural tendencies rather than fighting against them. Let us begin with one of the most immediately effective practices for clearing mental clutter: the brain dump. Your mind is not designed to hold and juggle dozens of pieces of information simultaneously, yet this is exactly what we ask it to do every day. You are trying to remember the grocery list, the deadline for that project, the phone call you need to make, the worry about your health, the idea for a creative project, the conversation you need to have, and 100 other fragments of thought. Each one takes up precious mental bandwidth. Each one creates a background hum of anxiety as your unconscious mind tries desperately not to forget anything important. The brain dump is beautifully simple. Take a blank piece of paper or open a fresh document on your computer. Set a timer for 10 minutes. Then write down everything that is occupying space in your mind. Do not organize it. Do not evaluate whether thoughts are important or trivial. Do not worry about grammar or coherence. Simply empty your mental cache onto the page as quickly as possible. Tasks you need to complete, worries that are nagging at you, ideas that keep surfacing, questions that need answers, concerns about relationships, fragments of conversations, anything and everything. Write it all down without pause or judgment. What happens during this process is profound. As each thought transfers from your mind to the page, you feel a subtle release. Your brain recognizes that the information has been captured and can stop expending energy trying to remember it. The anxiety that comes from the fear of forgetting begins to dissolve. By the time your 10 minutes are up, you will have externalized dozens, perhaps hundreds, of mental fragments. Your mind will feel lighter, more spacious, able to focus on what is actually in front of you rather than juggling an impossible mental load. But the brain dump is not complete until you take the next step, processing. Look at what you have written. Some items will require action. Some will be worries beyond your control. Some will be ideas to explore later. Some will be complete nonsense, thoughts that seemed important when they were swirling in your mind but reveal themselves as trivial once captured on paper. Create 3 categories. First, actionable items, things you can actually do something about. For each of these, decide on a concrete next step and either do it immediately if it takes less than 2 minutes, or schedule a specific time to address it. Second, concerns beyond your control. Acknowledge these, perhaps share them with a trusted friend or therapist if they are significant, but consciously choose to release them. You cannot solve what you cannot control. Third, ideas and possibilities. These go into a separate list or journal where you can return to them when you have time and energy for creative exploration. This process transforms mental chaos into organized information. It converts the overwhelming feeling of too much in my head into clear categories that can be addressed systematically. Practice this brain dump at least once a week, or whenever you notice that familiar sensation of mental overload. Some people find it helpful to do a brief version every evening, clearing the day's accumulation before sleep. Others prefer a more thorough weekly session. Find the rhythm that works for your life, but make it a non-negotiable practice. Your mind will thank you. Closely related to the brain dump is the practice of journaling, but journaling serves a different purpose. Where brain dumping is about externalization and clearing space, journaling is about understanding and integration. It is where you process emotions, examine patterns, explore questions, and make meaning from experience. The overthinking mind tends to circle around the same concerns repeatedly without ever truly processing them. Journaling breaks this cycle by forcing a linear progression of thought. When you write, you must put one word after another. You cannot think 5 things simultaneously. This constraint is liberating. There are many approaches to journaling, but let me share one particularly effective method for building mental clarity. Each day, write responses to 3 prompts. The first, what am I noticing? This is pure observation without judgment. Perhaps you notice tension in your shoulders, or a sense of dread about tomorrow, or excitement about a conversation you had, or simply the quality of light in the room. The practice of noticing cultivates awareness, and awareness is the foundation of all change. The second prompt, what am I learning? This invites you to extract wisdom from your experience. Perhaps you are learning that you need more sleep, or that certain people drain your energy, or that morning is your most creative time, or that uncertainty is more tolerable than you thought. The third prompt, what am I choosing? This focuses your attention on agency and intentionality. Perhaps you are choosing to set a boundary, or to speak up about something that matters, or to let go of a resentment, or to trust the process. Notice, learn, choose. These 3 movements cultivate a mind that is observant, reflective, and intentional rather than reactive and scattered. The key to effective journaling is consistency and honesty. This is not public writing. No one needs to see it. You can be completely truthful about what you think and feel without filtering or performing. This raw honesty allows you to see patterns that you might otherwise rationalize away. You might notice that every time you spend time with a particular person, you feel drained afterward. You might observe that your anxiety spikes when you consume news in the morning. You might recognize that your overthinking intensifies when you are hungry or tired. These insights allow you to make environmental changes that reduce mental clutter at its source. Now let us turn to a phenomenon that silently drains mental clarity throughout every day: decision fatigue. Your capacity for making decisions is a finite resource. Each choice you make, no matter how small, depletes this capacity slightly. By the end of a day filled with countless micro-decisions, what to wear, what to eat, which task to do first, how to respond to this email, whether to attend that meeting, your decision-making ability is severely compromised. This is why you might make poor choices in the evening even though you know better. It is not a failure of willpower. It is neurological depletion. The solution is not to make better decisions throughout the day. The solution is to make fewer decisions. This is why many highly effective people wear the same type of clothing every day. It is not about fashion. It is about eliminating a trivial decision to preserve mental energy for important ones. Steve Jobs famously wore the same black turtleneck and jeans. Barack Obama wore only gray or blue suits. These were not random choices. They were intentional strategies to reduce decision fatigue. Look at your own life and identify areas where you are making unnecessary decisions repeatedly. Perhaps you stand in front of the refrigerator every morning trying to decide what to have for breakfast. Instead, decide once that you will have the same healthy breakfast every weekday. Perhaps you waste energy each evening trying to figure out what to cook for dinner. Instead, create a simple meal rotation for the week and stick to it. Perhaps you scroll through streaming services for 20 minutes trying to choose what to watch. Instead, decide in advance based on recommendations from people whose taste you trust. This principle extends beyond practical matters. You can also reduce decision fatigue around behaviors and responses. Create personal rules that eliminate the need for constant deliberation. For example, I do not check email after 7 p.m. is a rule that eliminates the decision of whether to check email in the evening. I meditate every morning before coffee eliminates the decision of whether to meditate today. I say no to social invitations on weeknights eliminates repeated decisions about individual events. These rules might sound restrictive, but they are actually liberating. They free your decision-making capacity for choices that truly matter. When you do face an important decision, one that cannot be eliminated or automated, apply what I call the clarity pause. Before deciding, pause for 3 full breaths. This brief interval allows your prefrontal cortex to engage rather than letting your amygdala, your emotional alarm system, make the choice. Then ask yourself 3 questions. What are the facts of this situation, separate from my interpretations? What would I advise my best friend to do in this situation? Will this matter in a week, a month, a year? These questions cut through the emotional reactivity that often clouds judgment and allow clearer thinking to emerge. Another essential element of mental clarity is what I call the single focus principle. The human brain is not designed for multitasking. When you believe you are doing 2 things at once, you are actually rapidly switching between them, and each switch carries a cognitive cost. Research from Stanford University has shown that people who regularly multitask perform worse on every measure of cognitive function than those who focus on one thing at a time. Multitaskers are more easily distracted, less able to ignore irrelevant information, and slower to switch tasks even though switching is what they practice constantly. In other words, the more you multitask, the worse you become at everything, including multitasking. The single focus principle is simple. Do one thing at a time with your full attention. When you are writing an email, only write the email. Close other tabs and applications. Put your phone face down or in another room. Give the task your complete focus until it is finished or until you reach a natural stopping point. Then fully shift to the next task. This approach might seem slower, but it is actually far more efficient. Tasks completed with full attention are done better and faster than tasks approached with divided attention. More importantly, single focus work is deeply satisfying in a way that fragmented attention never is. You enter a state of flow where time seems to shift, where effort feels effortless, where you are fully alive in the present moment. Implementing single focus requires creating boundaries around your attention. This means structuring your environment to support concentration. If you work on a computer, use apps that block distracting websites during focused work periods. If you work in a busy office, use noise-canceling headphones or find a quiet space for concentrated work. If you are interrupted frequently, communicate clear boundaries about when you are available and when you need uninterrupted time. These boundaries might feel awkward at first, but they are essential for protecting your most valuable resource, your attention. It also means developing the internal discipline to notice when your attention has wandered and to bring it back without judgment. You will be working on something, and suddenly you will realize you are thinking about something completely unrelated. This is not a failure. This is simply what minds do. The practice is to notice, acknowledge my mind has wandered, and gently return attention to the task at hand. Over time, the gaps between wandering episodes lengthen, and your capacity for sustained attention deepens. Let us now address one of the primary sources of mental clutter in the modern age: information overload. We have access to more information than any generation in human history, and our minds are drowning in it. Every moment of every day, we are bombarded with news, opinions, advertisements, social media updates, emails, messages, articles, videos, podcasts, and more. The sheer volume is overwhelming, but more insidious is that most of this information is irrelevant to your actual life. It creates the illusion of being informed while actually filling your mind with noise that crowds out what truly matters. Building mental clarity requires becoming ruthlessly selective about what information you allow into your consciousness. Think of your mind as a garden. You would not allow every seed that blows by to take root. You would carefully choose what to plant and diligently remove weeds that threaten to choke out your desired growth. Apply the same principle to information. Before consuming any content, ask yourself, is this relevant to my goals, my values, or my well-being? Will this information help me make better decisions or take more effective action? Or is this simply mental junk food, stimulating in the moment but nutritionally empty? Most news fails this test. The vast majority of current events have absolutely no bearing on your life or your choices. Knowing about a scandal in a distant country, a celebrity's personal drama, or a political controversy you cannot influence does not make you more informed in any meaningful sense. It simply fills your mind with content that generates emotional arousal, usually anxiety or outrage, without providing any avenue for productive action. This does not mean you should be completely uninformed. It means you should be intentional about how and when you consume news. Perhaps you check a single trusted source once a day for 10 minutes rather than allowing news to interrupt you constantly throughout the day. Perhaps you focus on local news where you can actually make a difference rather than global events beyond your influence. Social media is even more problematic. The endless scroll is designed to be addictive, to trigger dopamine release with each new post, to keep you engaged for as long as possible. But what are you actually gaining? Most social media consumption leaves you feeling worse, not better. Studies consistently show that time on social media correlates with increased anxiety, depression, and feelings of inadequacy. You compare your behind-the-scenes reality with everyone else's highlight reel and feel like you are failing. You encounter opinions that outrage you and spend mental energy formulating responses to people who will never change their minds. You see opportunities and experiences you are missing and feel the sting of FOMO, fear of missing out. The most direct solution is to eliminate social media entirely, and many people find this profoundly liberating. If that feels too extreme, set strict boundaries. Decide how much time you will allow for social media each day, use an app to enforce this limit, and stick to it without exception. Turn off all notifications so that social media cannot interrupt you. Within seconds, your mind will wander. You will start thinking about your schedule, replaying a conversation, planning dinner, whatever. This is completely normal. This is not a problem to be solved. This is the practice. When you notice your mind has wandered, and you will notice it dozens of times in a single session, simply return your attention to the breath. No judgment, no frustration, just a gentle return. Think of it like training a puppy. When the puppy wanders off, you do not get angry. You simply guide it back. Again and again, with patience and kindness. This simple practice has profound effects that have been validated by extensive neuroscientific research. Regular meditation increases gray matter density in the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for executive function, decision-making, and emotional regulation. It decreases activity in the amygdala, reducing reactivity to stress. It strengthens the connectivity between different brain regions, enhancing your ability to integrate information and think clearly. It increases your capacity to sustain attention on a chosen object. Perhaps most importantly for our purposes, it changes your relationship with thoughts. You begin to see thoughts as transient mental events rather than as truths that define reality. This perspective is transformative for the overthinking mind. Start with just 5 minutes a day. Set a timer so you are not constantly wondering how much time has passed. Sit and watch your breath for 5 minutes. That is all. Do this every day at the same time, perhaps first thing in the morning, so it becomes automatic. As the practice becomes easier, gradually extend the duration. 10 minutes, 15, 20. But consistency matters more than duration. 5 minutes every day is far more beneficial than an hour once a week. If breath meditation does not resonate with you, there are many other forms. Body scan meditation involves systematically moving your attention through different parts of your body, noticing sensations without trying to change them. Walking meditation brings mindful awareness to the physical experience of walking. Loving kindness meditation cultivates compassion by silently offering phrases of goodwill to yourself and others. Experiment with different approaches and find what works for you, but commit to a regular practice. This is not optional if you truly want mental clarity. This is essential. Finally, let us explore what I call minimalist thinking. Minimalism is often discussed in terms of possessions, owning fewer things and living more simply. But the same principle applies even more powerfully to thoughts. The mind cluttered with unnecessary thoughts is as burdened as a house cluttered with unnecessary objects. Minimalist thinking is about identifying and releasing thoughts that do not serve you, creating mental space for what truly matters. Begin by recognizing that not every thought deserves your attention. Many thoughts are simply mental habits, patterns that repeat without offering any value. The thought "I should have said that differently" serves no purpose when replayed for the 100th time. The thought "what if this goes wrong" does not help you prepare unless it prompts specific action. The thought "I am not good enough" is not a truth to be believed but a story to be questioned. When you notice these habitual thoughts arising, you do not need to engage with them. You can simply note thinking and return your attention to the present moment or to more constructive thoughts. Minimalist thinking also means simplifying how you frame situations. The overthinking mind tends to create complex narratives filled with interpretation, assumption, and catastrophizing. Someone does not respond to your message immediately, and suddenly you have constructed an entire story about why they are upset with you, what this means for the relationship, what you should do to fix it. But the simple truth might be that they are busy. When you notice yourself creating complex narratives, pause and ask, what are the actual facts here, separate from my interpretations? Often, when you strip away interpretation, the situation is far simpler than your mind has made it. This extends to how you think about problems. The overwhelming feeling that often accompanies challenges comes not from the problem itself but from thinking about the problem in its entirety. Instead, break it down. What is the very next step you can take? Not the entire solution, just the next step. This approach transforms an overwhelming mountain into a manageable path. You do not need to see the entire journey. You just need to see the next step clearly enough to take it. Minimalist thinking is also about releasing the need to have opinions about everything. You do not need to formulate a position on every news story, every social controversy, every person's choices. This constant opinion forming is exhausting and rarely productive. It is okay to simply not have an opinion. It is okay to say, I do not know enough about that to have an informed view. It is okay to acknowledge that something does not affect your life and therefore does not require your mental energy. This releases tremendous space in your mind. Finally, minimalist thinking involves regular mental housekeeping. Just as you periodically go through physical possessions and release what you no longer need, periodically examine your mental contents. Are there grudges you are holding that no longer serve you? Are there worries you have been carrying that have not materialized and probably never will? Are there goals you are clinging to out of obligation rather than genuine desire? Are there beliefs about yourself that were formed long ago and no longer reflect who you are? Identify these mental artifacts and consciously release them. You might write them down and then tear up or burn the paper as a symbolic act of letting go. You might speak them aloud to a trusted friend, acknowledging that you are choosing to release these thoughts. The specific method matters less than the intentional act of release. Building mental clarity is not a single action but a collection of practices that, woven together, create a fundamentally different way of engaging with your mind. The brain dump clears the clutter. Journaling processes emotion and experience. Reducing decision fatigue preserves mental energy. Single focus deepens attention. Information filtering protects your mental space. Meditation trains your awareness. Minimalist thinking releases what does not serve you. Each practice supports and enhances the others, creating a synergistic effect far greater than any single technique alone. As you implement these practices, be patient with yourself. You have spent years, perhaps decades, operating with a cluttered mind. It will take time to establish new patterns. There will be days when you forget to journal, when you get sucked into social media scrolling, when your mind wanders constantly during meditation, when you make poor decisions because you are exhausted. These are not failures. These are simply part of the process. What matters is that you return to the practices, again and again, with compassion and commitment. Notice the small shifts that occur. Perhaps you realize you slept better after doing an evening brain dump. Perhaps you complete a project in half the time when you work with single focus rather than multitasking. Perhaps you feel more grounded after a meditation session, even though your mind wandered constantly. Perhaps you notice yourself catching a thought spiral earlier and choosing a different response. These small victories accumulate into profound transformation. Remember, you are not trying to eliminate thoughts or achieve some impossible state of perpetual calm. You are building the capacity to work skillfully with your mind, to recognize when clarity is present and when it has been lost, and to have reliable methods for returning to clarity when you notice its absence. This is the essence of mental clarity, not the absence of thoughts, but the presence of awareness, focus, and choice in how you engage with the thoughts that arise. And this capacity, once developed, becomes a foundation for everything else in your life. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. Chapter 4: A Calm Mind Lifestyle. There is a profound difference between living and merely existing. Living requires presence, clarity, and a mind that can settle into the moment without being pulled into the endless spiral of what-ifs and should-haves. Existing, on the other hand, is what happens when we allow our minds to run on autopilot, reacting to every stimulus, every notification, every fleeting worry that crosses our consciousness. In this chapter, we will explore how to build a lifestyle that supports a calm mind, not as a distant goal to be achieved someday, but as a daily practice that becomes as natural as breathing. Imagine your mind as a still lake at dawn. The surface is smooth, reflecting the sky with perfect clarity. This is your natural state, the state of calm awareness that exists beneath all the noise and turbulence. But throughout the day, stones are thrown into this lake. Each notification, each demand, each unresolved worry creates ripples that disturb the surface. Some stones are small, causing minor disturbances that fade quickly. Others are larger, creating waves that persist long after the initial impact. The art of living with a calm mind is not about preventing stones from being thrown, that would be impossible, but about learning to let the ripples settle more quickly and to recognize when we are creating our own disturbances. Let us begin with the foundation of a calm mind lifestyle: daily habits that anchor you in tranquility. These are not grand gestures or dramatic transformations. They are small, consistent practices that, over time, reshape the very architecture of your mental landscape. Think of them as tending a garden. You do not plant seeds and expect immediate blooms. You water, you weed, you provide sunlight, and gradually, something beautiful emerges. The morning sets the tone for your entire day. How you begin determines the quality of your mental state for hours to come. Many people reach for their phones immediately upon waking, flooding their still drowsy minds with information, demands, and the chaos of the world before they have even fully returned to consciousness. This is like throwing stones into the lake before the morning mist has cleared. Instead, consider beginning your day with silence. Even 5 minutes of sitting quietly, perhaps near a window where you can observe the light changing, can create a buffer between sleep and the demands of the day. During these moments, simply notice. Notice your breath. Notice the sensations in your body. Notice the quality of light, the sounds around you, the feeling of being alive without needing to do anything about it. This practice of morning stillness is not about emptying your mind, an impossible task, but about observing it without engagement. Thoughts will come. They always do. But in these quiet moments, you learn to see them as visitors rather than commanders. A worry about an upcoming meeting might arise. Instead of following it into a spiral of preparation and anxiety, you simply note its presence. There is a thought about the meeting, you might say to yourself, with the same detachment you would use to note, there is a bird singing outside. This small shift in relationship with your thoughts is the beginning of freedom from overthinking. As you move through your morning, consider the practice of single tasking. In our modern world, we have been trained to believe that doing multiple things simultaneously is a virtue, a sign of productivity and capability. But neuroscience tells us something different. When we attempt to multitask, our brains are actually rapidly switching between tasks, and each switch carries a cognitive cost. It creates mental friction, a kind of subtle stress that accumulates throughout the day. Instead, try this: when you brush your teeth, only brush your teeth. Feel the bristles against your gums, notice the taste of the toothpaste, observe the movement of your hand. When you prepare breakfast, be fully present with the preparation. Notice the colors of the food, the sounds of cooking, the aromas that fill the space. This is not about slowing down to the point of inefficiency. It is about bringing full attention to each action, which paradoxically often makes us more efficient while dramatically reducing mental clutter. Throughout the day, you will encounter moments of transition. The space between finishing one task and beginning another. The time it takes to walk from your car to your office. The few minutes waiting for a meeting to begin. These transition moments are sacred opportunities for mental reset, yet we typically fill them with distraction, checking our phones, planning ahead, or replaying what just happened. Instead, use these transitions as mini meditations. Take 3 deep breaths. Feel your feet on the ground. Look around and truly see your environment rather than moving through it on autopilot. These small practices create islands of calm throughout your day, preventing the accumulation of mental tension. Now, let us address one of the greatest sources of mental turbulence in modern life: our relationship with technology and information. We live in an age of unprecedented connectivity, and while this brings many benefits, it also creates a constant state of partial attention. Your mind is always waiting for the next notification, the next update, the next piece of information. This state of perpetual alertness is exhausting and fundamentally incompatible with mental calm. Digital detox does not mean abandoning technology entirely, though periodic complete disconnection can be profoundly beneficial. Rather, it means establishing intentional boundaries around how and when you engage with the digital world. Consider this: every time you check your phone without a specific purpose, you are training your mind to seek distraction. You are reinforcing the neural pathways of restlessness. Over time, this makes it increasingly difficult to settle into sustained focus or deep calm. Begin by designating specific times for checking email, social media, and news. Perhaps you check your email 3 times a day, at set intervals, rather than constantly monitoring your inbox. This single change can dramatically reduce the sense of being constantly interrupted. Your mind begins to understand that there are periods of unbroken focus, and it settles more readily into those periods. Create technology-free zones in your life. Perhaps your bedroom is a sanctuary from screens, allowing your mind to truly wind down before sleep. Perhaps meals are times of full presence, whether you are eating alone or with others. Perhaps the first hour of your morning and the last hour of your evening are protected from the digital stream. These boundaries are not restrictions. They are gifts you give to your nervous system, allowing it to find its natural rhythm rather than being constantly hijacked by external demands. Silence has become a rare commodity, yet it is essential for mental clarity. We have grown so accustomed to constant background noise, whether from television, music, podcasts, or the ambient sounds of urban life, that true silence can feel uncomfortable at first. But within silence, the mind has space to settle and reorganize itself. Thoughts that have been suppressed by constant stimulation can surface and be processed. Tensions that were masked by distraction can be felt and released. By identifying true priorities, you prevent your mind from spinning about lesser matters. The second prompt is, what am I worried about, and is this worry productive? List any concerns that are present. For each one, ask whether the worry is pointing towards something you can actually address or whether it is simply mental noise. This distinguishes between useful concern that prompts action and useless rumination that drains energy. The third prompt is, what am I grateful for in this moment? This question might seem disconnected from mental clarity, but it serves a crucial function. Gratitude shifts your brain's focus from what is wrong to what is right, from scarcity to abundance, from threat detection to appreciation. This shift changes your baseline emotional state and makes clear thinking far more accessible. These first 3 steps should take no more than 10 to 15 minutes total, yet they establish a foundation that influences your entire day. You have checked in with yourself, regulated your nervous system, and organized your mental priorities. Already, you are operating from a place of choice rather than reaction. The fourth step occurs throughout your day, and it is the practice of hourly micro-resets. Set a gentle alarm or reminder to go off once every hour while you are awake. When it sounds, pause whatever you are doing for 60 seconds. Take 3 deep breaths. Notice your posture and adjust if needed. Check in with your body and release any tension you are holding. Ask yourself, am I still focused on what matters, or have I drifted into distraction or overthinking? This hourly checkpoint prevents the accumulation of mental and physical tension. It keeps you from operating on autopilot for hours at a stretch, only to realize at day's end that you spent most of your time in reactive mode rather than intentional presence. The fifth step is the afternoon thought download. Midway through your day, perhaps during lunch or a natural break, spend 5 minutes writing down every thought that is occupying mental space. Do not organize or analyze these thoughts. Simply list them as quickly as they come. Tasks you need to remember, worries about future events, replays of conversations, ideas that have occurred to you, anything and everything that is taking up residence in your mind. Once you have emptied your mental cache onto paper, review the list and take action on what you can. If something needs to be done, either do it immediately if it takes less than 2 minutes, or schedule a specific time to address it. If something is a worry beyond your control, acknowledge it and consciously decide to release it. This process externalizes your thoughts, transforming them from nebulous mental burdens into concrete items that can be addressed or dismissed. Your mind, freed from the job of trying to remember and process everything simultaneously, can return to clarity. The sixth step is the evening reflection, and it serves as a bookend to your morning inventory. Before you begin your evening wind-down routine, take 5 minutes to review your day. What went well? Where did you feel clear and focused? When did you notice yourself falling into overthinking, and what triggered it? What would you do differently tomorrow? This is not an exercise in self-criticism. It is data collection. You are training yourself to notice patterns, to recognize the conditions that support clarity and those that undermine it. Over time, this reflection builds a deep understanding of your own mental tendencies, allowing you to navigate them with increasing skill. The seventh and final step is the pre-sleep reset. In the 30 minutes before you intend to fall asleep, eliminate all screens. The blue light from devices suppresses melatonin production, but more importantly for our purposes, screens stimulate the mind and make it nearly impossible to settle into the calm necessary for quality sleep. Instead, engage in activities that genuinely soothe your nervous system. This might be gentle stretching, reading poetry or fiction, listening to calming music, or simply sitting quietly and reviewing the day with appreciation. Then, as you lie in bed, practice a body scan meditation, moving your attention slowly from your toes to the crown of your head, releasing tension as you go. If your mind begins generating thoughts about tomorrow, gently redirect your attention to your breath. You have already planned for tomorrow during your evening reflection. Right now, the only task is to rest. These 7 steps constitute your daily mental clarity routine. In total, they require perhaps 45 minutes spread throughout your day, yet the return on this investment is extraordinary. You are not simply managing symptoms. You are rewiring the fundamental patterns of how your mind operates. Each repetition strengthens new neural pathways, making clarity increasingly automatic and overthinking increasingly rare. But routines alone, while powerful, are not sufficient for deep transformation. We also need models for structured thinking, frameworks that guide the mind when it encounters problems or decisions. Without structure, the mind tends to spin, approaching issues from random angles, circling back to the same concerns repeatedly, generating more confusion than clarity. Let me share with you several thinking models that will transform how you process challenges. The first is the clarity triangle. When faced with any problem or decision, draw or visualize a triangle. At the top point, write the core issue or question in its simplest form. Be ruthlessly specific. Instead of "I'm unhappy at work," write "Should I look for a new job or try to improve my current situation?" At the bottom left point of the triangle, list all the relevant facts. Not feelings, not interpretations, but verifiable facts. At the bottom right point, list all your assumptions, fears, and interpretations. By separating facts from interpretations, you prevent emotional reasoning from masquerading as truth. Then, from this clearer foundation, you can evaluate options and make decisions based on reality rather than anxiety-distorted perception. The second model is time horizon thinking. Overthinking often occurs because we collapse all time frames into the present moment, feeling the weight of past regrets and future worries as if they are happening right now. When facing a decision or worry, deliberately consider it across 3 time horizons. How will this matter in 24 hours? In 1 month? In 1 year? This simple question often reveals that what feels monumentally important in the moment may be barely noticeable even a short time from now. It restores perspective and prevents catastrophic thinking. The third model is the Action Influence Concern framework, adapted from Stephen Covey's work. Draw 3 concentric circles. The innermost circle represents your area of action, things you can directly control and change. The middle circle is your area of influence, things you cannot directly control but can affect through your choices and communication. The outer circle is your area of concern, things that affect you but over which you have no control or influence. When a worry arises, identify which circle it belongs to. If it is in your action circle, decide on a specific next step and take it. If it is in your influence circle, consider what indirect action might be helpful. If it is in your concern circle, practice conscious acceptance. You cannot change it, so spending mental energy on it only depletes you without producing any benefit. These models provide structure for the thinking mind. They transform nebulous worry into organized analysis. They convert mental spinning into directed problem solving. But thinking models alone are still not enough. The environment in which you live, the context of your daily life, must also support mental clarity. Life design for clear thinking is about intentionally structuring your days, your spaces, and your commitments to minimize mental friction and maximize flow. Consider your daily schedule. Does it reflect your actual priorities, or is it filled with obligations that serve someone else's agenda? Are there natural transition times built in, or do you rush from one thing to the next with no space to reset? Is there white space in your calendar, time that is deliberately unscheduled and available for whatever emerges, or is every hour spoken for? The clearest thinkers I have encountered all share certain design principles in their lives. They have consistent routines that remove decision fatigue. They know when they do their best creative work and protect that time fiercely. They batch similar tasks together rather than fragmenting their attention with constant context switching. They say no far more often than they say yes, understanding that every commitment is a choice about where to direct their limited mental energy. Look at your physical environment. Does it support focus or fracture attention? Is there a dedicated space for concentrated work, free from visual clutter and potential interruptions? Are the tools and resources you use regularly easily accessible, or do you waste mental energy searching for what you need? Small frictions accumulate into significant mental drain. A desk covered with papers requires constant filtering as your attention is pulled to each item. A phone within reach tempts constant checking. Environmental design is not about aesthetics, though beauty can certainly support calm. It is about reducing the cognitive load of navigating your space. Consider your information diet as carefully as you consider your food. What you consume mentally shapes the quality of your thinking just as food shapes the health of your body. Are you consuming content that genuinely enriches your understanding, or are you filling your mind with empty mental calories that provide stimulation but no nutrition? Are you exposing yourself to perspectives that challenge and refine your thinking, or are you only consuming information that confirms what you already believe? The clarity of your thinking depends not just on how you think but on what you think about. All of this brings us to what I call the simplify, slow, clarify model. This is both a philosophy and a practical approach that can be applied to any area of life where you find yourself overwhelmed or stuck in overthinking. Simplify means reducing complexity to its essential elements. When you feel mentally overloaded, the instinct is often to think harder, to try to process more, to develop more elaborate strategies. But complexity usually compounds confusion. Instead, ask yourself, what is the simplest version of this situation? What can I eliminate? What is the one thing that, if I focused on it, would make everything else easier or unnecessary? Simplification is not about dumbing things down. It is about cutting through superficial complications to reach the core. Slow means deliberately reducing your pace when you notice your mind racing. This is counterintuitive in a culture that equates speed with productivity, but there is a crucial difference between moving fast and thinking clearly. When you slow down, you create space for wisdom to emerge. You notice details you would otherwise miss. You feel the subtle signals from your body and intuition that get drowned out by mental noise. Slowing might mean taking an extra breath before responding in a conversation. It might mean walking to your next meeting instead of rushing. It might mean pausing for 10 seconds before starting a new task, allowing the previous one to complete in your mind. Clarify means actively seeking precision in your understanding. Vague thoughts create anxiety because the mind cannot solve what it cannot clearly define. When you notice mental murkiness, ask clarifying questions. What exactly am I worried about? What specific outcome am I hoping for? What would success actually look like? What is the real question I am trying to answer? Often, the act of clarifying the question more than halfway answers it. This three-part model can be applied in real time. You are in a meeting and feel your thoughts starting to spiral about a project. You simplify by focusing on the single most important point being discussed. You slow by taking a conscious breath before speaking. You clarify by asking a specific question rather than offering a vague comment. Or you are lying awake at night, mind churning about various concerns. You simplify by writing down one worry to address tomorrow. You slow your breathing intentionally. You clarify by asking yourself whether you are solving a problem or simply replaying it. Now we come to perhaps the most profound element of lasting change. Everything we have discussed, every technique and routine and model, is ultimately in service of a deeper transformation. You are not just learning to manage overthinking. You are becoming a different kind of person. You are evolving from someone whose mind is chaotic and reactive into someone whose natural state is calm thoughtfulness. This is not about perfection. It is about identity. Identity is the story you tell yourself about who you are. For years, you may have identified as a worrier, an overthinker, someone whose mind never stops. This identity has shaped your choices, your habits, your responses to challenges. It has become a self-fulfilling prophecy. You think of yourself as an overthinker, so you engage in overthinking, which reinforces the identity, which perpetuates the behavior. Breaking this cycle requires consciously adopting a new identity. Not as an act of denial or pretending to be someone you are not, but as a declaration of who you are becoming. You are becoming a calm thinker. This is not a distant goal. It is a present reality that you step into with each choice you make. A calm thinker does not have an empty mind. Thoughts arise just as frequently, but the relationship with those thoughts is fundamentally different. A calm thinker notices thoughts without being controlled by them. When worry arises, a calm thinker acknowledges it and asks whether action is needed. When the mind begins to spin, a calm thinker recognizes the pattern and consciously chooses a different response. When faced with uncertainty, a calm thinker is comfortable saying, "I don't know yet," rather than frantically trying to figure everything out immediately. To embody this new identity, begin using language that reflects it. Instead of saying, "I'm such an overthinker," say, "I'm learning to think calmly and clearly." Instead of "if my mind won't stop racing," say, "my mind is active, and I'm practicing settling it." These are not just semantic games. Language shapes perception, and perception shapes reality. By changing how you describe yourself, you begin to see yourself differently, and what you see yourself as, you become. Adopt the behaviors of a calm thinker, even before you feel like one. Ask yourself, what would a calm thinker do in this situation? How would a clear-minded person approach this challenge? Then do that thing, even if it feels unfamiliar or uncomfortable at first. You are not waiting to feel calm before acting calmly. You are acting calmly, and the feeling follows. This is how identity transformation works. You do not think your way into a new way of being. You act your way into a new way of thinking. Surround yourself with reminders of this new identity. Perhaps it is a simple phrase written somewhere you will see it daily. I am a calm thinker. Perhaps it is an object that represents clarity to you, a smooth stone or a particular image. Perhaps it is a person in your life who embodies the qualities you are cultivating, someone you can think of when you need to remember what is possible. These external anchors support the internal shift. Be patient with the process. Identity change does not happen overnight. There will be days when you fall completely back into old patterns, when you catch yourself in a spiral of overthinking and feel as if you have made no progress at all. These moments are not failures. They are opportunities to practice self-compassion and to recommit to the process. The difference between where you are now and where you are going is not that you will never overthink again. It is that you will notice it sooner, redirect more quickly, and return to calm more easily. As we move toward the close of this journey together, let me offer you a practical implementation guide, a roadmap for integrating everything we have explored. For the first week, focus exclusively on establishing the morning routine. The mental inventory, the coherent breathing, the clarity journaling. Do not try to implement everything at once. Build this foundation first. Notice how starting your day with these practices affects the rest of your hours. In the second week, maintain your morning routine and add the hourly micro resets. Set your alarm or reminder and honor it every time it sounds. Even if you are in the middle of something, even if it feels inconvenient, pause for that minute. You are training your nervous system to settle on command. In the third week, add the afternoon thought download and evening reflection. Now you have touch points throughout your entire day, from waking to sleeping, that support mental clarity. In the fourth week, begin working with the thinking models when you encounter decisions or worries. Use the clarity triangle, the time horizon thinking, the action influence concern framework. Apply them consciously until they become intuitive. Beyond these initial weeks, continue deepening your practice. Return to earlier chapters and implement techniques you initially passed over. Experiment with different approaches and notice what works best for your particular mind. Join or create a community of practice, people who are also committed to mental clarity, with whom you can share insights and challenges. Remember that this is a practice, not a project. There is no finish line where you arrive at perfect mental clarity and stay there permanently. The mind will always generate thoughts. Challenges will always arise. The difference is that you now have tools, understanding, and a framework for meeting those challenges without being overwhelmed by them. As you continue this practice, something remarkable will happen. The techniques that once required conscious effort will become automatic. You will find yourself naturally taking a deep breath in stressful moments without having to remember to do so. You will notice thoughts without being swept away by them. You will feel the early signs of overthinking and redirect before the spiral begins. You will experience longer and longer periods of genuine mental calm, not as an absence of thoughts but as a spacious awareness that holds thoughts lightly. Your relationships will change as you become calmer and more present. You will listen more deeply because you are not simultaneously planning what you will say next. You will respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. You will be able to hold space for others' concerns without taking them on as your own. Your work will transform as you bring greater clarity to what you do. You will make decisions more easily because you have frameworks for thinking through complexity. You will be more creative because a calm mind has access to insights that a cluttered mind cannot perceive. You will be more productive, paradoxically, by doing less but with greater focus. Your overall sense of well-being will shift. You will spend less time in worry and more time in wonder. You will experience fewer of those nights lying awake, mind churning. You will feel more in control of your internal experience, not because you are suppressing or avoiding, but because you have learned to navigate your mental landscape with skill. This journey we have taken together, from understanding overthinking to building routines to transforming identity, has been about reclaiming your mind. Your mind is your most precious resource. It is the instrument through which you experience all of life. When that instrument is chaotic and untuned, everything suffers. When it is clear and calm, everything becomes more vivid, more meaningful, more alive. You now have everything you need. The understanding, the techniques, the routines, the models, the framework for ongoing practice. What remains is simply the doing. Not perfect doing, but consistent doing. Showing up each day to practice, to notice, to redirect, to choose clarity over chaos. On the days when you forget or falter, be gentle with yourself. You are not trying to become a different person. You are becoming more fully yourself, stripped of the layers of reactivity and anxiety that have obscured your natural clarity. That clarity has always been there, like the still water beneath the ripples. You are simply learning to let it be seen. And so we arrive at both an ending and a beginning. The end of this guide, but the beginning of your practice. The end of learning about mental clarity, but the beginning of living it. Take what resonates, leave what does not, and most importantly, begin. Begin today, with one practice, one technique, one moment of choosing calm over chaos. And then begin again tomorrow, and the day after that, building through repetition the life and the mind you truly want. You are capable of profound mental clarity. You are capable of calm even in chaos. You are capable of thinking clearly, acting wisely, and living fully. The path is before you. All that remains is to walk it, one mindful step at a time. May your mind be clear, your heart be light, and your path be illuminated by the wisdom you discover within yourself. The wisdom you have gathered thus far provides the architecture for transformation, but like any structure, it requires not just blueprints but also the lived experience of inhabiting it, testing its walls, discovering which rooms become your sanctuaries and which passageways you travel most frequently. What I wish to share with you now are the deeper dimensions of this practice, the subtle territories that reveal themselves only after you have walked this path for some time, the questions that arise not at the beginning of the journey but in its middle stretches, when initial enthusiasm has settled into something more enduring and real. There comes a point in any meaningful practice when the novelty fades and you are left with the raw truth of repetition. This is not a failure of the method. It is the threshold where superficial commitment separates from genuine transformation. The techniques I have shared are not magic spells that work once and forever change you. They are tools that must be picked up again and again, sometimes feeling awkward in your hands, sometimes fitting perfectly, always requiring your conscious choice to use them. This is the nature of all lasting change. It is built not in moments of inspiration but in the quiet accumulation of unremarkable days when you show up anyway. Let me speak to you about resistance, because you will meet it, and when you do, you need to understand what you are encountering. Resistance is not your enemy, though it will feel like one. Resistance is actually a sign that you are approaching something meaningful. Your psyche has organized itself around certain patterns for years, perhaps decades. These patterns, even when they cause suffering, provide a strange kind of comfort through their familiarity. When you begin to dismantle them, a part of you panics. It sounds alarms. It generates every reason why you should not continue, why this practice is not working, why you should give up or try something else. Resistance manifests in countless forms. Sometimes it appears as skepticism. You will find yourself thinking that this is all too simple, that real change requires something more complex or dramatic. Sometimes it appears as forgetting. You will genuinely not remember to do your morning routine, even though you have done it every day for weeks. Sometimes it appears as rationalization. You will convince yourself that you are too busy today, that missing one day does not matter, that you will start fresh on Monday. Sometimes it appears as perfectionism. You will decide that if you cannot do the full routine exactly as prescribed, you might as well not do any of it. Learn to recognize these voices not as truth but as resistance. When you hear them, rather than debating their merits or feeling guilty about their presence, simply acknowledge, resistance. Hello. I see you. Then do the practice anyway. Not perfectly. Not with great enthusiasm. Just do it. Pick up your pen and write 3 things you are grateful for, even if you feel nothing as you write them. Take 5 minutes of coherent breathing, even if your mind wanders constantly. Show up to the practice not because you feel like it but because you have committed to becoming someone who shows up. Over time, something interesting happens with resistance. It does not disappear entirely, but it loses its power over you. You begin to see it as weather, passing clouds that temporarily obscure the sun but cannot actually extinguish it. You learn to practice even in the presence of resistance, and in doing so, you build a kind of psychological muscle that serves you far beyond this specific practice. You are learning to do what matters even when you do not feel like it, and this capacity is perhaps the most valuable skill you can develop in any area of life. Now let me address something that many people encounter but few speak about: the experience of feeling worse before feeling better. This is paradoxical but remarkably common. When you begin to slow down and pay attention to your mental state, you may initially become more aware of just how chaotic your thoughts have been. It is like finally turning on the light in a messy room. The mess was always there, but now you can see it clearly, and it can feel overwhelming. If this happens to you, understand that increased awareness of mental clutter is not evidence that the practice is making things worse. It is evidence that the practice is working. You are developing the capacity to observe your mind, and observation always precedes transformation. You cannot change what you cannot see. So if you find yourself thinking, "I never realized how much I overthink until I started trying to stop," celebrate this recognition. You are exactly where you need to be. There is also the phenomenon I call the plateau of practice. You will make initial progress, experiencing noticeable shifts in mental clarity and calm. Then you will hit a period where nothing seems to be changing. You are doing all the practices, showing up consistently, yet you feel stuck at the same level of mental clarity you reached weeks or months ago. This plateau is not a problem. It is an essential phase of integration. Think of it this way. When you learn a musical instrument, you do not improve steadily at a constant rate. You make breakthroughs, then spend long periods consolidating those gains, repeating the same scales and exercises until they become effortless, until the improvement that seemed absent suddenly manifests all at once in your ability to play something you could not play before. Mental clarity develops in the same way. The plateau is where the real work happens, where new neural pathways are being strengthened through repetition, where what was conscious effort is becoming unconscious competence. During these plateau periods, resist the temptation to abandon the practices or search for something new and more exciting. Resist the urge to add complexity, to try 10 different techniques at once in hopes of forcing a breakthrough. Instead, go deeper with simplicity. If you have been practicing coherent breathing for 5 minutes, see what happens when you extend it to 10. If you have been doing your morning routine quickly, slow it down and bring more presence to each element. If you have been journaling in a perfunctory way, try bringing more honesty and specificity to your answers. Often, what looks like lack of progress is actually an invitation to greater depth. Let me also speak to the question of adaptation, because the practices I have shared are frameworks, not rigid prescriptions. They need to be adapted to your specific life, your particular challenges, your unique nervous system. Some people find that 5 minutes of coherent breathing is perfect, while others need 15 minutes to feel the shift. Some people thrive on detailed journaling, while others need just a few key questions. Some people need more structure, while others need more flexibility. The way to discover what works for you is through experimentation and honest observation. Try a practice as described for at least 2 weeks before modifying it. This gives you enough data to assess its effects. Then adjust based on what you notice, not what you imagine or hope will work. Does morning journaling actually help you feel clearer, or does it feel like an obligation that creates more mental noise? Do hourly resets genuinely help you stay centered, or do they fragment your focus when you are in deep concentration? Be willing to customize while also being honest about when customization is genuine adaptation versus resistance wearing a clever disguise. There is an art to distinguishing between these. Genuine adaptation feels like refinement. It makes the practice more effective or sustainable for you. Resistance disguised as adaptation usually involves doing less than you know you need to do, finding reasons why the parts that feel uncomfortable can be skipped. A useful question: is this change making the practice easier in a way that serves my growth, or easier in a way that lets me avoid discomfort? Both are valid depending on the situation, but knowing which you are dealing with matters. As your practice deepens, you will begin to notice increasingly subtle dimensions of your mental experience. You will start to sense the early warning signs of overthinking before it fully develops. It might be a particular tension in your chest, a quality of your breath becoming shallow, a slight shift in how you are holding your jaw, or a barely perceptible change in the quality of your thoughts. These early signals are precious. They are the moments of maximum leverage, when a simple intervention can prevent what would otherwise become a cascade of mental noise. Develop a personal catalog of these warning signs. Keep a section in your journal where you note the earliest indicators you have observed before falling into overthinking. For some people, it is a feeling of urgency, a sense that everything needs to be figured out right now. For others, it is a quality of repetitive questioning, the same question circling back multiple times without resolution. For others still, it is a physical sensation, a tightness or a flutter or a heaviness. The more precisely you can identify your unique early warning system, the more skillfully you can intervene. When you notice these early signs, you need a repertoire of rapid interventions, practices that take less than a minute but effectively interrupt the pattern before it gains momentum. Here are several that prove reliably effective. The first is what I call the reset breath. Exhale completely, as if you are blowing out birthday candles with genuine force. Then allow the inhale to come naturally, fully, without effort. Repeat 3 times. This simple pattern breaks the shallow breathing that accompanies mental spinning and signals to your nervous system that the emergency is over. The second is the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique. Name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. This pulls your attention out of your head and into your immediate sensory experience. You cannot simultaneously be lost in thought and genuinely present to your senses. By anchoring in the physical world, you interrupt the mental spiral. The third is the perspective question. Ask yourself, will this matter in 5 years? This single question can instantly deflate the inflated importance that overthinking assigns to situations. Most of what we agonize over will be completely forgotten within days or weeks. This does not mean these things do not matter at all. It means they do not merit the amount of mental energy we are giving them. The fourth is what I call the compassionate observer statement. When you notice yourself starting to spiral, silently say to yourself, there is thinking happening. This is just what minds do. I am safe. I can let this be. This statement combines mindfulness, which observes without judgment, with self-compassion, which offers comfort, and with permission, which releases the need to control or stop the thoughts. Often, the thought spiral is sustained not by the original thoughts but by your resistance to them, your attempts to make them stop. When you stop fighting, the thoughts often settle on their own. Practice these interventions not just when you need them but also when you do not, so they become accessible under stress. Spend a week where several times each day, regardless of whether you are overthinking or not, you practice one of these techniques. This builds familiarity and automaticity, like a martial artist practicing moves until they become reflexive. When the actual moment of need arrives, you will not have to remember the technique. Your body will already know what to do. As you continue this journey, your relationship with uncertainty will necessarily transform. So much of overthinking is driven by the intolerance of not knowing, the desperate need to figure things out, to have answers, to be sure. But life, in its essential nature, is uncertain. No amount of thinking can eliminate this uncertainty. The future remains unknown. Other people remain fundamentally mysterious, their actions and motivations never fully predictable. Even your own feelings and desires shift and change in ways you cannot always anticipate. The practice of mental clarity is not about achieving certainty. It is about becoming comfortable with uncertainty, learning to function effectively even when you do not have all the answers, even when you cannot predict outcomes, even when the path forward is unclear. This comfort with uncertainty is perhaps the ultimate mark of a calm mind. It is the ability to say, I do not know what will happen, and that is okay. I will respond to whatever comes with the best wisdom I can access in that moment. Cultivating this comfort requires both philosophical understanding and practical habituation. Philosophically, it helps to recognize that the certainty we crave is largely an illusion anyway. Even when we feel certain, we are actually operating on probabilities and assumptions that could be wrong. The person who demands certainty before acting is actually demanding something that does not exist, which is why they remain paralyzed. The person who accepts uncertainty as the basic condition of existence is free to move forward despite it. Practically, you habituate yourself to uncertainty by deliberately practicing with small uncertainties and noticing that you survive them. Do not check your email first thing in the morning. Let yourself not know what arrived overnight. Notice the slight anxiety this creates, and notice that it is bearable. Choose a restaurant without reading every review. Make a small purchase without researching it exhaustively. Take a different route to a familiar destination without mapping it first. These small experiments in uncertainty train your nervous system to tolerate not knowing, and this tolerance scales up to larger uncertainties. There is a particular practice I have found useful for working with uncertainty, which I call the certainty inventory. When facing a decision or situation that is generating overthinking, write down everything you are certain about, everything you are uncertain about, and everything you are assuming but treating as certain. This exercise often reveals that you actually have more certainty than you thought, that the uncertainty is more limited in scope than it felt, and that many of your anxieties are attached not to true uncertainties but to assumptions you have not examined. For example, you might be agonizing about whether to pursue a new career opportunity. You write your certainty inventory and discover certain facts include your current salary, the job requirements, the location of the new position. Uncertain elements include whether you will like the new role, whether you will succeed, how your relationships might change. Assumptions treated as certain might include beliefs like I will regret it if I do not try, or changing jobs is always stressful, or my partner will be supportive. By separating these categories, you can address each appropriately. Facts inform your decision. Uncertainties you acknowledge and accept. Assumptions you examine and reality test. Let me now address the social dimension of this practice, because you do not exist in isolation, and the people around you will be affected by your changes, sometimes in ways that create friction. As you become calmer and less reactive, some people in your life will welcome and celebrate this change. They will feel more comfortable around you, appreciate your presence, seek you out for your groundedness. But others may actually resist your transformation, though rarely consciously or maliciously. The reason is this: relationships develop equilibriums, patterns of interaction that become familiar and expected. When one person changes significantly, it disrupts this equilibrium, and disruption feels threatening even when the change is positive. If you have historically been the anxious one, the overthinker, the person who worries about everything, and you begin to show up differently, the people who have related to you in that role may feel confused or even uncomfortable. They may unconsciously try to pull you back into familiar patterns through subtle or overt criticism, through jokes about how calm you have become, through creating drama that invites you back into worry. Recognize this dynamic without taking it personally. People are not trying to sabotage your growth. They are simply navigating their own discomfort with change. Your response is to remain steady in your practice while also being patient and compassionate with others' adjustment periods. Continue to show up as the calmer version of yourself. Allow people time to acclimate. Some relationships will deepen as you become more present and less reactive. Some relationships may naturally fade if they were built primarily around shared anxiety or drama. This is not a tragedy. It is evolution. You may also encounter people who are inspired by your changes and want to know what you are doing. Be generous in sharing what has helped you, but be cautious about becoming evangelical or prescriptive. What works for you may not work for others. Different nervous systems, different life circumstances, different challenges require different approaches. Share your experience as your experience, not as the truth everyone must follow. Offer information without attachment to whether others use it. Your transformation is its own testimony. It does not require validation through others adopting your methods. There is also the matter of maintaining practice during difficult periods, because life will bring challenges that test your commitment to mental clarity. Illness, loss, major life transitions, unexpected crises, these situations create legitimate disruption and distress. During these times, you might think the solution is to double down on your practices, to do even more to maintain your calm. But often, the wisest approach is to simplify to the absolute essentials. When you are in crisis, do not try to maintain your full routine. Instead, identify the one or two practices that provide the most support and protection, and commit to just those. For most people, this core practice is some form of breathwork and some form of physical discharge like walking or gentle movement. These two elements, conscious breathing and movement, can carry you through almost anything when maintained with consistency. The breath is always with you. No matter what is happening externally, you can always access your breathing and use it to regulate your nervous system. Even 30 seconds of conscious breathing several times throughout a difficult day provides an anchor, a reminder that beneath the storm of circumstances, you still exist, you are still here, you still have agency over your internal state. Movement discharges the stress chemicals that accumulate during difficult times. When you are in fight or flight mode, your body is preparing for physical action. If you remain sedentary, all that activation has nowhere to go, and it amplifies mental anxiety. Walking, stretching, even vigorous cleaning or organizing can provide an outlet for this energy and prevent it from being recycled into more thinking. During crisis periods, also give yourself permission to do practices imperfectly or incompletely. 5 minutes of journaling is infinitely better than 0 minutes because you could not manage the full 15. 2 minutes of breathing is better than none because you did not have time for 5. The practices during difficult times are not about growth or optimization. They are about maintenance, about preventing complete deterioration, about preserving some thread of connection to your capacity for calm. They are the difference between weathering a storm and being destroyed by it. After the crisis passes, return gradually to your full practice. Do not expect to immediately resume where you left off. There may be some ground to recover. This is normal and not a failure. You survived difficulty without completely abandoning your commitment to mental clarity. That itself is a victory worthy of recognition. Let me also address the question of what happens when your practices genuinely stop working, when techniques that were effective for months suddenly seem to produce no results. This is different from resistance or from plateau. This is a signal that you may have outgrown a particular practice or need to adjust your approach. Like any relationship, your relationship with your practices will evolve. What you needed at the beginning of your journey is not necessarily what you need now. When you sense this shift, rather than abandoning everything in search of something new, First, try deepening your current practices. Go beneath the surface. If coherent breathing has become rote, experiment with bringing more awareness to each breath, noticing subtle sensations you might have been glossing over. If journaling has become mechanical, try writing in a different location or at a different time of day. If your morning routine feels stale, switch the order of the elements or add a minute of silence between each practice. If deepening does not restore effectiveness, then it may be time to explore adjacent practices or to take a deliberate break from certain elements. You might replace coherent breathing with a body scan meditation for a while. You might substitute clarity journaling with art journaling, expressing your mental state through drawing or collage rather than words. You might shift from structured practices to more spontaneous moments of mindfulness throughout your day. The key is to make these changes consciously and deliberately, not in reaction to restlessness or boredom. Ask yourself, what does my practice need right now? What would serve my continued growth? Then experiment, observe, adjust. Remember that effectiveness is not measured only by how calm you feel immediately after a practice. Sometimes the most valuable practices are those that help you process and integrate difficult material, which can initially feel uncomfortable but leads to deeper clarity over time. As you continue on this path, you will begin to encounter what I call the subtle obstacles, the ways that even a calm mind can trap itself. One of the most common is what I call spiritual bypassing or, in this context, clarity bypassing. This is when you use your practices and your growing mental clarity to avoid dealing with legitimate emotions or difficult truths. You notice sadness arising and immediately do breathwork to calm yourself, bypassing the sadness rather than allowing yourself to feel it fully. You face a conflict in a relationship and use your mental clarity frameworks to analyze it rationally, bypassing the messy emotional reality that needs to be addressed. You experience anger and immediately try to understand it and release it, bypassing the information that anger might be offering about boundaries that need to be set. Mental clarity is not about eliminating emotions or transcending human experience. It is about having space to experience things fully without being overwhelmed by them. There is a crucial difference between using practices to regulate yourself so you can engage with difficult material, and using practices to avoid difficult material altogether. The first is wisdom. The second is a sophisticated form of avoidance. The antidote to clarity bypassing is to periodically ask yourself, am I using these practices to become more present to my life, or to distance myself from parts of my life I find uncomfortable? If you notice the latter, the solution is not to abandon your practices but to expand their purpose. Use your morning journaling to honestly name what you are avoiding. Use your coherent breathing to settle yourself enough to have a difficult conversation rather than to calm yourself so thoroughly that you decide the conversation is unnecessary. Use your mental clarity to see situations accurately, including the parts that are painful or uncomfortable, rather than to construct a comfortable narrative that avoids truth. Another subtle obstacle is the trap of constant self-monitoring. As you become more aware of your mental states, there is a risk of becoming hypervigilant about them, constantly checking, am I calm? Am I overthinking? How is my mental clarity right now? This meta-level monitoring can itself become a form of overthinking, a way the mind finds to be busy even in the absence of external problems. The solution is to practice what I call the light touch. Yes, maintain awareness of your mental state, but with the lightest possible attention, like resting your hand on a railing as you walk downstairs. You are aware it is there, you use it when needed, but you are not gripping it with white-knuckled intensity. Most of the time, you do not need to be actively monitoring your mental state. You will know if you fall into overthinking. Your awareness has become sensitive enough that the shift will be obvious. Trust this sensitivity rather than constantly testing it. There is also the obstacle of attachment to calm itself. You have experienced the peace and clarity that comes from a settled mind, and now you want to maintain that state constantly. Any fluctuation feels like failure. Any return of mental noise feels like you have lost your progress. This attachment creates its own form of suffering. You are peaceful only as long as things remain peaceful, which means your peace is conditional and therefore fragile. True mental clarity includes the capacity to experience mental noise without being undone by it. It means you can notice, my mind is busy right now, without panicking or judging or desperately trying to fix it. It means you trust that the noise is temporary, that you have practices and capacities that will help you return to calm when the time is right, and that sometimes the noise itself is carrying important information that deserves to be heard before it dissipates. Let your practice include acceptance of all mental states, not just the calm ones. This is the deepest form of equanimity, the ability to be at peace even with the absence of peace, to be clear even about your own temporary confusion, to hold it all with compassion and wisdom. This does not mean passivity or resignation. It means responding to mental noise skillfully without adding layers of resistance and judgment that compound the difficulty. As you deepen into this practice over months and years, you may find yourself called to share what you have learned, to help others who struggle with overthinking. If this impulse arises, honor it, but also be mindful of how you engage with it. The most effective way to help others is not through advice or teaching but through presence and example. When you are genuinely calm, people feel it. They are drawn to it. They want to understand how you inhabit yourself so steadily. Your lived example opens them to possibilities they may not have believed existed. If you do choose to actively help others, whether through informal conversation or more structured teaching, remember that you are not trying to fix anyone. You are simply offering tools and perspective that they can choose to use or not. Hold your knowledge lightly. Remain curious about others' experiences rather than assuming your path is the path. Be willing to admit what you do not know, what still challenges you, where you still falter. This honesty makes your guidance more credible and more relatable than any pretense of having achieved perfect mental clarity. The journey of mental clarity is not linear. It is more like a spiral, where you encounter similar themes and challenges at deeper levels as you progress. You will find yourself working with anxiety or overthinking that you thought you had mastered, but now you are engaging with it from a place of greater understanding and skill. You will revisit practices you set aside months ago and discover new depths in them. You will have insights that feel completely new but that, upon reflection, you realize you already knew on some level but could not fully embody until now. Trust this spiral process. Do not interpret revisiting old challenges as going backward. You are not back where you started. You are on a new turn of the spiral, addressing familiar territory from a higher perspective. Each time you meet an old pattern, you have new resources, new understanding, new capacity. You are not repeating. You are integrating at a deeper level. And finally, remember that this entire practice, all these techniques and frameworks and routines, are ultimately pointing toward something that cannot be captured in words or methods. They are pointing toward a quality of being that is your natural state when all the layers of conditioning and reactivity and fear are allowed to settle. You are not trying to achieve some special state or become someone you are not. You are uncovering what has always been true beneath the noise. Your mind, in its essential nature, is clear. Thoughts arise and pass like clouds in the sky, but the sky itself remains unchanged. You are that sky. The practices help you recognize this truth not just intellectually but experientially, in your body, in your lived moment-to-moment experience. As this recognition deepens, the whole project of managing your mind begins to feel different. It becomes less of a struggle and more of a gentle returning, less about fixing what is broken and more about allowing what is whole to be revealed. Continue the practices. Show up each day. Notice when you forget and return without judgment. Be patient with yourself and with the process. Trust that the small, seemingly insignificant actions you take each morning, each hour, each evening are accumulating into a transformation far more profound than you can see in any single day. You are rewiring your brain, retraining your nervous system, and most importantly, remembering who you are beneath the overthinking, beneath the anxiety, beneath all the noise that once seemed like the totality of your mind. The clear mind you seek is not somewhere you need to arrive. It is where you have always been, waiting to be recognized. Every practice, every technique, every moment of choosing calm is simply a way of clearing the view, of dissolving the obscurations, of letting yourself see what has always been true. You are not broken and needing to be fixed. You are whole and learning to remember your wholeness. Walk this path with dedication and self-compassion. The mind you are cultivating will serve you in every area of your life, every relationship, every challenge, every joy. It is the foundation upon which everything else is built. And as you continue this journey, may you discover that the calm you seek is not something you achieve but something you already are, beneath everything, always and forever, simply waiting to be lived.